Now I'm recording. Okay. Our book is called Reading, Thinking, and Writing About History.
By Chauncey, not this Chauncey, Montesano, Susan de la Paz, and Mark Felton, with foreword by Sam Weinberg.
I'm sure you all wanted to know.
Good old Sam.
Okay. So, the book basically focuses on developing skills by using the content that you're supposed to teach, so the core curriculum. So
yeah, it's just the same. So this is taught like as you progress through your class, you would insert this during your normal units as you're teaching the content, and then you build on that content with historical literacies.
So you'll see later as we go through this presentation that it's very focused on very specific Common Core requirements for a specific class. So we'll
historical literacies particularly. Because Common Core doesn't talk about what content you teach, it's more skill-based. So first off, there's two areas where it teaches skills. The first is in primary source document analysis, and it has the, what's it called? It's called acronym. Thank you. Gosh. An acronym to use with your students on how to analyze primary source documents. So first is, it's I read to help them, I read primary source documents. Easy to remember. So you identify let me see that PowerPoint thingy. That'll be easier. You identify the author's argument up here in this box. You read for the main idea. So as you read the document, each paragraph you usually know what the main idea of that paragraph is. Examine the author's reliability. So this is partially like sourcing, access, context. So what is the context of this document? What's going on at the time? Why would they write it in this format? Who are they writing it to? And finally, determine the quality of the author's facts and examples. So it's a little bit different than saying like sourcing and contextualizing, but they're essentially the same skills, just in a more digestible way and rememberable way that students can access them. So that's how you analyze the primary source documents offered in this.
So if you notice with this acronym, this is super explicit for students. Like you don't just hand them the document and say, what do you think about this? It lays it out for you with questions to ask, very, very specific and explicit that will help these students analyze the document. So that's the acronym I read, and that's one of the main focuses that he always comes back to throughout this book. So the next thing is another skill that he teaches to be historically literate. It's called how to write. It sets it up like this. So you have your introduction, and then again, very explicitly, gives the students exactly what it is that they need to say to have a good introduction. Recap the event, explain the historical question, why people disagreed, your answer to the historical question. So very explicit, very good. If you're trying to help students learn these skills, this is very, very effective scaffolding for them. So then it just goes down through
with supporting paragraphs, and then eventually a rebuttal paragraph, and then a conclusion. So it's your basic 5-paragraph essay, but it is scaffolded in a way that I think this is another one of those situations where we talked about with the last presentation, that we think our students should be able to do these things, but we forget that a 5-paragraph essay for us is like a 2-hour ordeal.
It's a blessing. It's a blessing.
It's like, oh, this is so easy. For a 6th grader or a 7th grader, and even some high schoolers, 5-paragraph essay is daunting. So this scaffolds it really well so that they know this is what's expected of me and this is how to write effectively.
So another, these are the questions that this book addresses. So they're really good questions for using the inquiry method that we talked about.
There are 6 units that this book presents, and each one is based on one of these questions, and they all come from the first half of U.S. history. And the way that they set these up is they have the question, and on each side of the controversy, so take the first one for example, it says, who fired the first shot at Lexington Green? They'll have a document that says it was the Americans, and they have a document that says it was the British. And so students have to analyze these just two documents, so it's really simple. You're not like collaborating with lots of sources. And it's really easy for them to answer. It's either it was the Americans or it was the British. It's not like, why might the Americans have fired? It's that could have 100 different answers. It's one or the other, which makes it really simple for students to come up with an answer, and especially if they're building these historical literacies as they go. And as well, the primary source documents that they use have been simplified. So, I mean, reading something from 1775 or 1776 is very different than reading now. So they've simplified the primary source documents to make them accessible to students, even students that read a little bit below grade level. So
we'll give you an example of that a little bit later.
They do have the original sources that you can get them, and you can give those to your more advanced students. So it allows for a little bit of differentiation.
Okay, so a great part about this is the scaffolding, like we mentioned before. The two documents with the opposing views, which Ben just finished talking about, it's all highly scaffolded, which gets the students into their zone of proximal development. It allows the kids who might have a harder time understanding and corroborating and sourcing these documents, the scaffolding allows them to still understand and still perform these skills in practice.
And then this last part here, that it's progressive. With the I read and the how to write, just plopping those on students' desks at the beginning could also be very daunting. So the way that it does it, and it really ties into zone of proximal development, because at the very beginning, there's very little that they can do, but if you throw the whole I read and how to write on them at the very beginning, before they've ever done this before, that is not within their zone of proximal development. So the way that the units are structured is within the first unit, you only do the first couple steps, the IRE part of I read. You don't access the context or determine the quality of the facts. And you only write, let's go back to this. So you only write with the first one an introduction and a conclusion. That's more manageable for students, and that gives them time to develop those skills first. Once you get onto the second one, you add the A, so you access the context with those documents in the second unit, and I believe that you start your first evidence-based paragraphs. So as the units go on, at the beginning they're doing minimal amount of work so that they can develop those skills, and by the end, they've added all of the steps and added all of the arguments in their essays. So it moves, not only is it scaffolded for units, but as the whole book as a total, it's scaffolded from one unit to the next, so that your students are always within their zone of proximal development. So, do you want to explain the activity?
Yeah, so like Ben was saying, the first unit, this who fired the first shot at Lexington Green, just goes over the first three. That's what we're going to actually work on right now. So Ben will pass out one of the documents that is included. We don't have time here to go over both of them, but we just want you to kind of be able to see what the type of things that the students are going to be reading, and how accessible they are, and the scaffolding that's involved with this. So as he's passing that out, it's pretty clear instructions on there. And then after we're going to go through this activity together, and then after we're going to talk about the pros and cons of doing it this way. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind for this. Okay.
So for this document particularly, this is a document from Lieutenant John Baker, who was a British soldier at the Battle of Lexington. This is his writing in a journal. Something important for you to know, and that the students would know, is that journals were used sometimes in court cases for the British military. So he's not writing this like a normal diary. he probably would have some knowledge that this might be made public. And then you are supposed to do with the first document, the only steps that you go over, we're not going to explicitly teach how to do this. You would do this with the class and explain these. But these are the only ones you do. You identify the author's argument up here at this top box right here, where it says I. Read for the main idea. As you read each paragraph, there's a little box next to each. Just write that. And then down at the bottom, examine the author's reliability. Just fill out the line there, E. You don't need to do A or D. Are there any questions on that? Shouldn't take you too long. It's 2 paragraphs. So, and then there's that if you forget what each stands for.
The class is now working. Chauncey's working really hard. They're learning about Lexington.